Don't worry, we have a restart button for a reason. Pretend that the last time that I hit anything, nothing happened. You didn't see anything. I also didn't say anything about this video ending my career because I was going to speak about Vaush. Never said that. Never said that. Fan art section, and then we'll talk about the Vaush situation. You have no idea how not embarrassing that thing that definitely didn't happen is. We have a piece from insert username here, Yassified Suris with and without glasses. I enjoy both of these versions. We have another piece, no context given, but from Sylvia Silica, using the Witch Suris model. Very blushy, if I might say. The next one that we have, and the last one for today, is from Rafuka? I am not pronouncing this one correctly. Nekosuris Abs, made in Koikatsu. It definitely looks to be a 3D model, but more abs to trigger Sargon. More abs than I have. I am very overweight. That said, as always, thank you all for your fan art submissions. I greatly appreciate it. And if you want your fan art to be shown in a future video, the best way to do so is to drop it into the fan art section of the Discord. With that said, let's go ahead and talk about the Vaush drama. All right. Rusty Shank, thank you very much for redeeming your points for an... before we get into all of this, you fucking degenerate. So, for those who've been living under a rock, a thing happened with Vaush recently, and I've got some opinions on it, and I've withheld them for a little bit because I wanted to get more information and see how some of this would plan out instead of just popping in a knee-jerk reaction. My position hasn't changed much since this has started, but I did still want to make sure that my position wouldn't have to like randomly change because somebody stepped in shit. But so where's my rock to be back under? Well, it's gone. Full disclosure, I have talked to Vaush in DMs about this situation in general to get his perspective and make sure that I understand his position. I'm not going to be leaking those DMs because to do so would be a violation of consent between two adult individuals. And I wish there were other adult individuals who understood that a violation of consent like that is not a good thing. But we'll be talking about that later as well. So, let's go ahead. Vaush, the thread we're talking about is when Vaush said all J.K. Rowling had to do was shut the fuck up and she could have been almost uncritically beloved for like a century. And then here's the actual problem. Women be quieter and start apologizing challenge. Let's go ahead and get one thing out of the way. Ironic or not, it's misogyny and it's bad for optics. We know that. I don't think I have to actually hammer down this point. And in fact, I think hammering down this point creates more problems than it solves. Let's go ahead and see how J.K. Rowling responded to that, because this is the thing that J.K. grabbed. So, J.K. then said, what you and your ilk fail to appreciate is how tediously familiar I find your tactics. I had a violent ex-husband who used to tell me life would be great if only I'd comply, but you're making the same mistake he did, and women like me can't be bullied out of resistance. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the issues here. So J.K. Rowling is going against Vaush, believing that Vaush is coming in with the misogyny for the purpose of shutting her down because she's a woman. As I've spoken with Vaush on this issue, and as I'm somebody who's been familiar with him for the last few years, most people who are familiar with Vaush know that that's not the case. The dude's not actually a misogynist. But stuff like this does give ammunition to misogynists. It does. Let's go ahead and point out, though, that how much does it matter that this gives ammo? How much does it matter that this gives ammo to people like J.K. Rowling? My position is it doesn't. The reason for that? J.K. Rowling quote tweets random tiny trans accounts, random people of all the time, quoting them out of context or quoting them as the only people who are saying things against her, and is always adding ammunition to her repertoire. Grabbing something that Vaush said as ammo, it doesn't really change reality all that much. This is a habit that she's been doing for the past few years, and she'll continue to do, no matter who it is. So, Vaush's response here Listen, Joanne, you don't have to play the victim card when you're the advocate for taking away women's rights here. Trans women are raped and killed in men's facilities, and you want to keep them there because of your trauma. Quit making your feelings other people's oppression. All right, so this and this are the points that Vaush is trying to get across. This is what most people seem to be focusing on. Not this point, which is valid, not this point, which is valid, but this one. So here's where I have to give full disclosure. I am of two minds about this. And there's a bunch of fallout that's happened as a result of this that we have to get into as well. But when it comes to this issue in specific, let's go ahead and run through the situation as it exists. So we know that what Vaush is doing here is ironic humor, right? Does that make it okay? The answer to that is, well, no. Reason being, ironic humor is fine. If you want to make a sexist joke, if you want to make a racy comment, if you want to make any of that, all of that is okay, provided that the person that is hearing the things you are saying knows you're being ironic, and you know that the person that is listening to you knows that it is ironic and is holding a position against the thing you're saying. Ironic, edgy humor is fine if everybody is in on the joke. If somebody's not in on the joke, then somebody is slighted. So, where does this come into play when we're talking about this tweet? Not everybody on Twitter is going to get the joke. Not everybody on Twitter is going to understand that it's ironic humor. I think the point about, oh my God, conservatives will use this as ammo against you, I don't think it's very valid because they use everything as ammo. Every little tiny thing from every person on the goddamn planet who labels himself as some type of progressive gets turned into a piece of political ammunition by these people. That point is almost entirely invalid because if it weren't Vaush, it'd be somebody else. But I also think that the point that when it comes to ironic humor, everybody needs to be on the joke is still there. Unless you're willing to offer a clarification instantly, then I think you need to keep those types of conversations into private areas. So let's go ahead and talk about the other thing here. Or there's a bunch of other things to talk about here. So in this situation, Vaush is talking about J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling finds this despite not being added on Twitter, which means JK is just searching up her name on Twitter, or just anytime somebody mentions her name, she's got a filter that throws it into her feed. Who knows? We don't know what it is. But again, I think this adds fuel to the flame that no matter who it was, she would be using their stance as ammunition. Perfectly reasonable takes from trans people. She's also used as ammunition. This is just a thing J.K. Rowling does nowadays. Where things get undermined is that Vaush didn't say J.K. Rowling be quieter challenge. Vaush said women be quieter challenge. This is where the ironic humor conversation comes in. And again, me focusing on this is an issue, and I'll get into why it's an issue in a second, but it still has to be addressed. Fuck everything that JK does literally forever. But there are better ways to say that. You can say idiots be quieter. You can say J.K. Rowling be quieter specifically. Do I think that he should not have sent the tweet at all? This is where we have another issue. It gets really hard to say. Because now we've got to look at this consequentially. I cannot deny the effectiveness in terms of getting on J.K. Rowling's radar. And I'm a really results-oriented person. The effectiveness here is that Vaush's views, not views specifically, but searches, like, because I looked at the Google Trend searches after this happened, Google Trend searches for Vaush have doubled as a result. So if we talk about net positives and net negatives, if the negative here is people who don't know Vaush see this ironic humor and don't get the joke and therefore get hurt by it because it is a legitimately harmful comment, then that goes on our bucket of negative things. But if the bucket of positive things are people who agree with this humor, then go to Vaush's channel hoping to find an ally, and then find that he's not a misogynist, and then end up having their positions changed later on down the road by being on Vaush's channel, which has happened to a great many people already. Now we have a situation where we start having unquantifiable net gains and net losses. It will be incredibly hard, if not impossible, to find the amount of people that will see this humor, think that Vaush is a Nick Fuentes or a Ben Shapiro type of person, hop over to his channel looking for an ally, and find that he's not their ally. We don't know which of those people are going to stay and have their minds slowly change as a result. We don't know how many people are going to leave as soon as they realize that the bread they came for is not the bread they thought is there. We don't know. The good intent of a tweet like this is targeting J.K. Rowling because fuck her. Bad execution, wording it as all women. The good results are getting into a fight with JK, which increases Vaush's optics, which increases the likelihood of people who don't know him coming to see his channel and then not coming out to be as bad assholes as they would have otherwise. Because I've seen that happen with Vaush's content all the time. One of the shticks with Vaush is he engages in edgy humor to bring people who do not want, or to bring people who are on the right wing of content solely because they're willing to be more edgy. By providing an outlet that has the same style of edgy humor, but engages in net positives for people who are trans, people who are racial minorities, etc., and instead of bringing them over there, instead of having them stuck with your Ben Shapiro types, your, conservative twin types, your Steven Crowder types, pulling them over because you're using the same type of language, but you are not engaging in the same rhetoric is a valid strategy. I know that there's a conversation people have about this all the time about debate bros versus video essayists. I don't think that that's a fair comparison because there are video essayists who can be very edgy and there are debate bros who can be very, less than antagonistic. It's more about the fact that we need to be pragmatic on the left and understand that there is a breadth of things that change people's minds, and focusing on just one type of thing will mean that there are people that will be lost to right-wing politics in general. Diversity of tactics is a good thing. To bring up an example, if we have a person who would otherwise be sitting in Nick Fuentes' audience because Nick is going to make fun of women, they're an incel type, maybe that's the type of humor that they like, it's not good, but they then see Vaush's take and then go, oh, look, another content creator I can watch, and then find that everything that Vaush stands for is polar opposite of Nick Fuentes. This person actually has a chance of changing their mind because they've willingly walked into another content creator's content where there's a higher likelihood they'll have their minds changed, as opposed to watching that content as filtered through the content creator they agree with already. And yeah, people in chat are pointing out that like Beau of the Fifth Column does a lot of this stuff too. Like his aesthetic, his appeal. I know people in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, Georgia, who would look at Beau of the Fifth Column and go, oh, look, it's one of us. And then when they get there, they would find left-wing talking points. And that is not what they're there for, but there they are. So there's a couple of aspects about this we got to talk about as well. What is Vaush's actual position? What does he think in his heart of hearts? To paraphrase what happened in our conversation, he mentioned that J.K. Rowling and other conservatives have a limitless supply of ammunition, which is something I already agree with. It doesn't matter what you say, they will always give them ammunition. They'll always have ammo. Whether you're right, wrong, placid, or antagonistic, no matter what you say, they will have ammo. There's billions of us, and there's no way to filter everything all of us say in general. So trying to make sure that all of us are more placid, so that nobody will clip us disingenuously, it doesn't do a whole lot of good. I still stand by the fact myself that we should still be more careful with what we say, because we don't know if somebody who has no idea what our content is sees stuff. But there's, again, still the conversation we had about net gains. Anyway, Vaush's position is that playing into J.K. Rowling's narrative by overstating how harmful the ironic misogyny is does nothing but give her power. It gives conservatives power to bemoan black men sagging their pants or having bad rap lyrics. It does nothing but give them power if you begin every statement with, well, Ben Shapiro's got a point. Well, Mark Dice has a point. Well, Steven Crowder has a point. That seeds ground unnecessarily. At least that's Vaush's position. I asked him if I could sum up his position as the thing I did was bad, but everybody's playing into the enemy's hands by focusing on that. His response to that was, I think that is narrowly correct, but it shaves off a lot of the context that justifies that logic, which is why I wanted to bring that context forward in the video itself. All without actually showing the DMs that we actually had, because now we got to talk about Cat Black, a content creator who I'm not as familiar with as Vaush, and maybe that plays into my biases a little bit. But in an almost 100 tweet response to Vaush, somewhere in there, she managed to leak DMs that were had between her and Vaush. And on top of leaking DMs that were had between her and Vaush, she also disparaged him sexually, which is when it is done towards somebody who you have engaged sexually with, which they claim to have at the very least sexted together on various occasions, is a form of harassment. There's no real two ways around that. If I have sex with somebody and then afterwards I say, well, they had a crusty, saggy vagina anyway. Their sex in bed with them was terrible. If I go and do that shit, that's not cool. But somehow magically, it's more okay when Cat does it because it's Vaush. That is weird to me. I can be of two minds where the Vaush tweet is concerned. To point out that, two of the things you said were good, one of them is notoriously bad. But I can't be of two minds when it comes to stuff like that. Leaking personal DMs without consent is a bad thing. I've had the exact same issues when I was talking about Essence of Thought. Back when the drama was happening between, and I know somebody's going to get mad that I'm using the term drama, but that's what it is. Whether you think that word downplays the severity of the situation or not is up to you. But it is a functional usage of the word. When the drama between Essence of Thought and Rationality Rules was happening, at least back when the fires under that were lit in such a significant degree that the entire atheist community was talking about it almost nonstop, Essence of Thought was leaking DMs that they had with Logic, leaking DMs they had with Rationality Rules, leaking DMs they had with Logic's wife, all without the consent of every other party involved. And to quote EOT, in those scenarios, your consent is a non-factor, was what they said. At least I believe that one was to either Logic or Logic's wife. It wasn't, those ones were not given to Rationality Rules. The point is, all of that happened. So I've seen this shit happen before. If I'm having private DMs with you, unless I am sexually harassing you, which, in a perfect world never happens, but unless I'm doing that, then don't fucking leak DMs. If there's an abuse situation and that needs to be put forthright, that is important to put forthright. But if it's literally just, we had a conversation in private, the general rule is the private conversation stays private in that regard. So I've heard people I respect mention sexting and vague tweeting about genitals, sexual harassment, of stress. What are your thoughts? So instead of vague tweeting about genitals, calling that sexual harassment is a stretch. If the person you're talking about knows it's about them, then it is harassment. There's no ifs, ands, or buts there. I really don't think there's any middle ground there. So that's a part of the conversation that needed to be brought up, because while I am not as familiar as I could be with Cat's content, this is a moment where instead of focusing on the conversation at hand, it got blown out of proportion way farther than it needed to be. Literally to the point of a form of harassment, a disgusting low form of it. It doesn't make Cat a bad content creator. It doesn't make her a horrible person, but it does factor into this conversation. Now, there was also a falling out between Vaush and ContraPoints during this, and I have less to say about that because it more seemed that, Contra was vehemently disagreeing with Vaush, and they were talking past each other, and then Contra burned the bridge with Vaush, blocked him. I don't know. I looked through that comment thread, and that's about the vibe that I got. And I'm not going to make this video as a call for, we need all leftist unity right now. We need everybody to stop what they're doing and rally behind someone, because if we don't do that, then we're playing into the conservatives' hands. No, I'm doing this to voice my opinion on a situation. I don't think that everybody has to rally around Vaush. Everybody can have their own opinions on it. But I think having an uncritical, unnuanced opinion on what he's said based solely on a single part of a greater bit of his conversation, something that's been clarified in apparently 3 videos at this point, is a bit much. It is a bit much. So there's a tendency still double standard. Oh, hold on. Suris, I do think that a lot of people will get mad at this logic. Tell me if you disagree, but I do think that people are not calling what she said harassment because it's towards a man. This does bring up another conversation we have to have. There's a propensity on the left, and I don't know if everybody's noticed it, but there's a bit of a propensity on the left to diminish the thoughts and feelings of people who are cis, of people who are white, and usually the reason given is that minority groups have not had as much time to speak. They have not had as much time in the spotlight, so they deserve more of that time, more of our ears, etc. I don't disagree with that logic. I don't, because it's true. It's 100% true that minority voices are usually squashed in these conversations. However, I do not think that elevating minority voices needs to come at the cost of everyone else. It doesn't need to. There are some people who would disparage anybody who is, cis, who is heterosexual, who is white, merely for being those things. And that's a very extremist take. You don't see it often, but believe me, peruse Twitter long enough, and especially peruse Reddit long enough, you'll find those people. You'll find assholes on the right who care about your race and are racist towards you, and you'll find assholes on the left who do the same thing, just through a different filter. The same thing with your gender. Misandry is a word, it exists for a reason, and it happens to people. Now, whether or not you want to call what's happening to Vaush here blatant misandry, that is entirely up to your own prerogative, because, it would be misandry in response to misogyny. Ironic misogyny that if you know who Vaush is not really misogyny, but it's still there nonetheless. No one wants to call trans women a sexual harasser. Well, statistically, they don't do it that often, but statistically, most people don't sexually harass that often. But, there are trans people who are sexual harassers. To deny that is kind of dumb. What was her, I can't remember her name. The woman who was obsessed with periods, who tried to get a whole bunch of children to go to a pool party, is as just an example of, yes, there are trans people who exist who are also monsters. Jessica Yaniv. That's Jessica Yaniv. Jessica Yanivs exist. Not all trans people are Jessica Yanivs, but Jessica Yanivs exist. Just like bigots. There are trans bigots. We call them Blair White. And I know I'm probably going to lose a lot of subscribers over this video. They're going to see this video as blatant protection of Vaush, or blatant... what's the best word for it? I guess cocksucking would be the word for it. Defense of Vaush, despite the fact that this video is entirely of two minds. Yeah, not all lesbians are Lily Cade, but, So I'm pretty certain when I do the call out to, hey, if you want to support my channel, subscribe to me, or pop over on Patreon, I do so knowing there are probably going to be, I'm going to predict at least 200, maybe 300 people who just unsub from my channel from this video. Might happen. I could have spent this entire time not commenting on the situation. But I do think the conversation about needing to look at things with a more critical eye, needing to look at things in terms of net gains and net negatives, and not just on how they look in the middle of the optics Twitterverse, and also pointing out that there are certain forms of harassment and ethical breaches that need to be talked about as well. I think all of that conversation is important to have. And yeah, a lot of that conversation can happen irrespective of your position on Vaush. Make of it what you will. I think in this situation, pointing out hey, this is a bad look, but J.K. Rowling is worse, as opposed to just ceding ground to J.K. Rowling, would be the correct strategic thing here. In terms of damage done to people, Vaush may make people angry with the words he says. J.K. Rowling literally funds organizations that would have trans people erased over time. Maybe that's the greater conversation to be had here. Yes, the thing he said was bad. The thing he said was wrong. Focusing on it more so than need be is probably the wrong card to play. With that said, let me know what you guys think. Comment below. I know there's going to be a lot of disagreements on this one, and that's fine. With all that said, everybody, insert end of video tagline here.